Hey guys, welcome back to Eric Reacts with History and Lore, Season 2 of Game of Thrones. And I put this off for a little too long. I'm actually halfway through Season 3. I meant to get into this earlier, but the TV show was just too captivating, and I couldn't get back into this just yet. But I felt like there were some things that I was missing that I probably wouldn't have if I had seen this. So I'm going to get into this now. I don't know how much I'm going to watch of it in one sitting, but we'll see. Let's get started. Greyjoy Rebellion by Theon Greyjoy.
When Aegon and his dragons burned Harren the Black and all his sons at Harrenhal, the days when men feared the sight of our longships were over. Aegon would not permit marauders and raiders in his 7 kingdoms. With Harren died our empire, and the old way that forged it. But what is dead may never die. 6 years after Robert Baratheon won his crown, my father, Balon Greyjoy, sought to restore our ancient rights. He declared the Iron Islands independent, and himself its king, and sent the Iron Fleet in a daring raid on Lannisport where they burned the Lannister ships at anchor, making us unchallenged in the Sunset Sea. This was the seed of our undoing. My eldest brother Roderick led a frontal assault on Seaguard, a town built to protect the mainland from us. After ferocious fighting beneath the city walls, he was slain by Lord Jason Mallister, and his men defeated. By this time, Stannis Baratheon had brought Robert's fleet around Westeros, and somehow managed to trap the Iron Fleet at Fair Isle, smashing it. Robert's victory was now all but assured, yet we made him bleed for each island. Stannis Baratheon captured Great Wick, the largest of the Iron Islands, and Ser Barristan Selmy himself subdued Old Wick. Robert and Lord Eddard Stark led the main assault against the island of Pike. They razed the town of Lordsport to the ground before Robert turned his full fury on our family's stronghold. When they breached the walls, the first through was Thoros of Myr with his ridiculous flaming sword, followed by every minor lord of Westeros hungry for glory. My other brother Maron was killed when the siege engines brought down a tower on his head. I was now my father's only living son, and heir to the Iron Islands. When my father saw his cause was lost, he wisely conceded defeat to Robert, who otherwise would have pulled down our castle stone by stone with us in it. As my father said to me then, no man has ever died from bending his knee. He who kneels may rise again, blade in hand. He who will not kneel stays dead, stiff legs and all. As it stands, Robert allowed my father to keep his lands and title as Lord of the Iron Islands, King of Salt and Rock, Son of the Sea Wind, Lord Reaper of Pike, for a price. His last son and heir shipped off to Winterfell as an honoured guest. I would eat at the Stark's table and play with the Stark children. And if my father rebelled again, Lord Eddard Stark would take his sword and cut off my head. It would be his duty.
That's honor? That's honor, Ned. Harrenhal by Catelyn Stark. That's
on the shores of the
some
God's
nice
Eye,
background information.
due north of the Isle of Faces, rises a monument to arrogance and cruelty. Harrenhal. For a people who prided themselves on their ships, the Iron Men of old seized any chance to leave them, and carved out a vast kingdom from the peaceful river lords. The empire reached its zenith under King Harrenhal, called the Black by those he terrorized, and by his own men, though they meant it proudly. King Harren enslaved the Riverlands to raise the mightiest fortress Westeros had ever seen. A castle that could garrison 1,000,000 men, with walls so vast that winters would come and go, and besieging armies grow old and grey before the castle fell. 5 towers he ordered, reaching into the heavens like grasping fingers. A monstrosity which he forced our people to build for their own subjugation. But the very day the slaves laid the last stone, Aegon Targaryen and his sisters arrived in the south. When they arrived with their small army,
The day it was
Harren
finished.
laughed and shut the gates. Harrenhal would have its first test, and an easy one at that. It failed. Harrenhal could have withstood an assault from all the armies in Westeros combined. But Harren learned that the tallest and thickest walls meant little to dragons. for dragons fly.
Oh man,
With
Daenerys
Harren
is
and
gonna
his sons
destroy
dead,
everything.
Harrenhal quickly surrendered to Aegon. House Tully then raised the River Lords in rebellion against the Iron Islands. And with Aegon, we flushed the Iron Men to the sea. We should have torn down the castle stone by stone then. But Harrenhal seemed such a magnificent prize that Aegon gave it to one of his commanders, whose line then withered to extinction.
Yeah.
As would every family to hold it thereafter.
Whoa.
When many speak of
wow.
Harrenhal, their voices drop to whispers about Mad Lady Lothson, who was said to send a giant bat to collect children for her crockpots, and to bathe in blood and serve feasts of human flesh. About the ghosts of Black Harren and his sons who still walk the castle at night, all aflame. Of the servants who went to bed in full health, and were found in the morning, burnt to ash. Mere stories to frighten wayward children and excite young girls, you may say. You would not be entirely wrong. Harrenhal is a prize. A nigh impregnable castle with enough land and enough income to make a man, at a stroke, one of the greatest lords in Westeros. But you would not be entirely right either. Say by a king's grace, Harrenhal became yours. Now you must garrison it. You must repair it and maintain it. Even stretched to the ends of your means, you cannot fill and manage the whole castle. So you retreat your household to 4 of the 5 towers, then 3, then 2, then only the bottom thirds of those. You close the whole of 100 hearths and take your meals in your rooms. Even then you can't shake the feeling of desolation, that Harrenhal and its vastness is devouring you.
Wow.
In later years, as you bury a grandson or a great-grandson, the last of your line, you will know it has.
Wow, that's pretty intense. House Greyjoy by Theon and Yara.
Where the north has its honor and the south its chivalry, the Iron Islands has its strength.
We call ourselves the Ironborn, and we are warriors feared throughout the 7 kingdoms.
Or so we used to be. Unlike their mainland cousins, the first men of the Iron Islands never bowed to the old gods.
Theirs was the drowned god, who made the Ironborn to reave and sack and write their names in salt, steel, and song, that his enemy, the Storm God, could not wash away. We raised our kings from our own ranks, and used beaten foes as thralls to work our mines and farm our land.
Or as salt wives, if a woman was pretty enough. Such was the old way, and while we followed it, we held sway wherever the waves were heard. When Aegon came demanding fealty, King Harren the Black ruled as far east as the Trident.
Other kings like the Starks could kneel, but Harren was Ironborn, and the Ironborn must be beaten. In Harrenhal, he had the mightiest castle in Westeros, and the army to defend it.
But Aegon did not intend a siege. He mounted his dragon and roasted Harren and all his sons in their tower, and the Old Way with them. Because of Harren's defiance, Aegon pushed the Ironborn back to our islands and gave the Riverlands to the Tullys. But he did allow the Ironborn to choose who would lead them.
House Greyjoy had always been one of the greatest houses of the Iron Islands. We trace our descent from the Age of Heroes and the legendary Grey King, who took a mermaid to wife and made war upon the Storm God for 1,000 years.
Whoa.
Blessed by the drowned god, the Grey King fought and slew Naga, the great sea dragon, and took her fire for his own.
This history made our ancestor Vicon Greyjoy the natural choice to lead the Ironborn after Aegon's conquest. For 300 years, House Greyjoy ruled the Ironborn. We styled ourselves Lord of the Iron Islands, King of Salt and Rock, Son of the Sea Wind, Lord Reaper of Pike.
In truth, we were thralls. Our people still chanted, "What is dead may never die." But the Old Way had died.
Until the Targaryens followed their dragons into the grave, and our Lord Father, Balon Greyjoy, rose against the new king, Robert Baratheon. He seized our ancient crown and sent our iron fleet against the Lannisters at Lannisport, burning all their ships before any could weigh anchor.
Though Robert and Eddard Stark would later defeat him, they understood us no better than Aegon. The Greyjoy sigil is the Kraken. What it grasps once, it will never surrender.
What is dead may never die, but rises again, harder and stronger.
Hail Hydra! Alright. Greyjoy Rebellion by... Okay, Stannis Baratheon. Let's...
Though
hear this.
Robert had risked all our lives to win it, the Iron Throne bored him. He cared little for justice, and less for rule. If it weren't women or wineskin, he had no use for it. Without the stalwart Jon Arryn as Hand of the King, the challenge to Robert's crown would have come much earlier than it did. The Iron Islands have never lacked for treachery. They respect only strength, and honor is as foreign to them as the Seven. After 6 years, their ruler,
What a line.
Lord Balon Greyjoy, wagered that King Robert had not won the support of the great houses of Westeros, many of whom still named him usurper. Lord Balon declared the Iron Islands independent, and sent his Iron Fleet to Lannisport. Lord Tywin Lannister was careless, and the Ironborn caught and burnt his ships at anchor.
Tywin
Lord
was...
Balon and his reavers controlled the Sunset Sea. Robert then ordered me to
Careless.
succeed where his father-in-law, Lord Tywin, had failed. Beneath Robert's fury, I sensed relief. War he could understand. He would smash Lord Balon as he had Rhaegar. I raised Robert's fleet and sailed around Westeros to the Iron Islands. I set a trap for the Iron Fleet off Fair Isle. As sailors and warriors, the Ironborn are unparalleled. But they're not soldiers. They have no discipline, no strategy, no unity. In a battle, each man fights only for his own glory, and their longships are built for lightning strikes and shore raids. When the captains rushed in, I smashed their longships with our larger war galleys. The strength of the Ironborn is in their ships. With the Iron Fleet broken, I had assured Robert's victory. He could now transport troops and siege weapons to invade the Iron Islands. And contrary to Balon's hopes, Robert had plenty of both. I've never seen such allegiance as Robert could inspire in war. Enemies who tried to kill him one day would be drinking with him the next under their own fallen banners.
Wow.
In rebelling against the Iron Throne, Lord Balon did more than Robert ever could to cement his rule. When Robert came to the Iron Islands, he brought with him the full power of Westeros. Sir Barristan Selmy of the King's Guard led the assault on Old Wick, while I subdued Great Wick, the largest of the Iron Islands. But Robert saved the seat of House Greyjoy, Pike, for himself and Lord Eddard. Robert would later boast of the battle's bloodiness and how he could have torn down the island into the waves if Lord Balon hadn't bent the knee. But if I'd have led the assault, Balon's neck would have bent, under his sword, because I do not forget, I do not pardon. His time will come. All their times will come.
Stannis. The Drowned God by Yara Greyjoy.
The Seven are gods of weakness and defeat, pretty chains that the first men kindly put on after the Andals crushed them, except in the Iron Islands. Since the Dawn Age, the Ironborn have followed the Drowned God, who plucked fire from the sea and made us to reave and sack and carve our names in blood and song. When the Andals landed on the Iron Islands, they found a god who was father, warrior, and stranger, who took mother, maiden, and crone when he would, and held the smith in thrall. His priests are the Drowned Men, who are clothed and armed by the sea itself. They consecrate us to the Drowned God through our most sacred rite, the drowning, and ask the god to raise us from the sea as he was, harder and stronger. The Ironborn do not fear the bloodiest battles or the roughest waves. For the drowned god taught us long ago that what is dead may never die. When an Ironborn falls, we say the drowned god needed a strong oarsman and took him below to feast in the god's watery halls, attended by mermaids. But even in death, an Ironborn is a warrior. We fight against the storm god, who holds a castle in the clouds, and sends the winds to lure the Ironborn off course or wreck our ships.
It's pretty cool.
It's said my legendary ancestor, the Grey King, waged war upon the storm god for 1,000 years. With the drowned god's help, he slew the great sea dragon Naga and used her bones for his hall. After his death, the storm god tried to wash away any memory of this terrible foe, but his songs fill our halls to this day.
That's pretty
It
cool.
was the storm god who first blew the Andals to the Iron Islands, to subdue us and turn us from our faith. True, they conquered and killed our king, but in time they forsook their septs for the shore, and their fat septons for the drowned men. The Andals came to us as conquerors. In the end, they drowned. The Ironborn are of the sea, as our god made us, and given to it as our god taught us. We do not fear the storm god's winds or his waves, but you should, for they bring us to you.
Greyjoy Rebellion by Robb Stark. Interesting.
Dark wings, dark words. I was only a boy when the Raven came to call my father, Lord Eddard Stark, to another war. Balon Greyjoy had raised the Iron Islands in revolt and burned the Lannister fleet at anchor. King Robert Baratheon again needed his old friend. My mother Catelyn was not happy to lose her lord husband to Robert again. 6 years before, he had left her to avenge his father and brother against the Mad King. But now he had sons and daughters of his own, and, unspoken, another son who wasn't hers from the last time he went to war. My brother, Jon Snow. But she knew that in marrying my father, she had married the North. We hold our honor and duty as dear as our old gods. When the time came, my father marched south to restore peace and order to the realm. My father always told me the Iron Islands were a strange and dangerous place. Its people, the Ironborn, keep neither the old gods nor the Seven, and despise all honest toil. Their ancestors ravaged the western shores, raping and slaving and putting it to the torch, and their songs still ring through the halls of the Ironborn, while everywhere else they're whispered to wayward children at bedtime. Perhaps Lord Balon thought Westeros had not healed from the war against the Mad King, and was as fragmented and suspicious as the ancient kingdoms his forebears had terrorized. Robert's navy corrected him at Fair Isle when they smashed the Proud Iron Fleet. Robert and my father corrected him at Pike, his own castle, when they pulled down his towers and breached his walls. My father never liked to speak of his battles, but from other men I learned what transpired. Thoros of Myr was first through the breach with his flaming sword. Not far behind him was Jorah Mormont of Bear Island, my father's bannerman who earned the knighthood he would later shame, and lords from every corner of the Seven Kingdoms. All day, through every passage in the castle, they fought side by side. My father with our ancestral sword Ice, and King Robert with his warhammer against a horde of axe-wielding Ironborn. In the end, Lord Balon bent the knee.
Swords are good against
Robert
axes.
generously allowed Lord Balon to retain his title and castle. The price of peace was custom. The only son of Balon's to survive his foolish rebellion would be taken as a hostage against future treasons. My father even volunteered to foster the boy himself. I suspect to make Theon Greyjoy a different man than his father, who would bring honor and duty to the Iron Islands when he returned as heir. So my mother's silent fear came true, and my father returned with another child. Theon ate with us, played with us, and fought with us. Once the great bond between my father and Robert Baratheon united the realm against a mad king and brought him to justice for his crimes. Now, another monster sits on the Iron Throne, and another debt of blood is owed my family. Theon is my murdered father's ward, I am my murdered father's son. Like my father and Robert, bound in blood, if not by blood, we are brothers.
Yeah. Alright, so I'm going to pause right here. Because, yeah, that seems to wrap up the whole Greyjoy Rebellion and their history. Robb is going to... Yeah, like I said before, I'm halfway through Season 3 already, so I already know Robb's going to be pretty pissed at Theon for taking Winterfell. No longer brothers. That's interesting, though. Catelyn was afraid Ned would come back with another son. But he did, but it's not a bastard son at the very least for him. And we also learned in Season 3 how... I guess if you haven't seen Season 3 yet and you're watching along with me somehow, spoilers, but how Jon Snow... How Catelyn prayed for Jon Snow to die, and he was very close to death, and she was just like, I am the worst woman in the world. And she wanted to treat him like a real son, but couldn't bring herself to do it. Oh, man. There's a lot of interesting stuff in there. I'm very happy. Yeah, I should have... I don't think it affects how I would have viewed anything in the story in Season 3 so far, but I would have loved to have this background. Anyway, guys, that's going to be it for this video. Oh, I did want to mention one more thing. In Episode 1, that's going to come up in a couple days, I accidentally say that Daenerys... I thought Daenerys was in Westeros, so that's what prompted me to be like, oh, I should go back and watch the history and lore, because when Daenerys is sailing on that ship in Episode 1, I thought she was already going to Westeros, and it wasn't until Episode 4 that I realized, oh, like, Astapor is not in Westeros. She's still, like, very, very far away. So I was just like, oh, maybe I would have realized if I had watched history and lore when I should have watched it, and maybe I should have checked a map. But anyway, guys, that's just a heads up. Be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys soon. Bye, friends.